how, when one is building a documentary festival, are you thinking about balancing the market pressures and the market opportunities
Exactly.
versus the kind of artistic pressures? I don't see them as in polar opposition. I see it a little bit as actually the truth of what the documentary field is right now. And our festival is really a mirror on what is happening in the field. There are many celebrity documentaries that are phenomenal, that are incredible portraits of remarkable people doing remarkable things. And just because it's featuring a well-known person shouldn't necessarily mean that it's a
Right. Good day, Sky Sitney, co-founder and festival director of DC Docs, which is running from June 12th to 15th. Sky, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. The last 10 days before the festival, so
Right,
everything's
which
all the
must be
trains
the
are
most
lea
the most stressful part of it. So DC Docs, you're on your third year, and I was thinking before we talk, it must be one of those things when you presented the idea of DC Docs, people must have assumed, oh, there already was a film festival in DC. Why do we need another one? But it's become like a staple of DC filmmaking already, and I would say nationally in the documentary world in just 3 years. So, can you talk about how you came up with the idea and then went forward
Sure.
with founding DC Docs?
Yeah. The reality is that the origin story of DC Docs is precisely because the festival that had occupied for nearly 20 years the kind of space in DC for documentary film was going away. And that, of course, is what came to be known as AFI Docs.
Okay.
In its early days, it was known as Silver Docs. And actually, both myself and the co founder, my partner on DC Docs, had a very important and enduring relationship with that prior festival. I was its festival director for nearly 10 years. I actually served a number of roles. My last one was festival director. I started as director of programming. And my colleague, Jamie Shore, co founder of the festival, ran its press for the last 8 years of its life. And actually, what happened was when we learned that AFI Docs was no longer going to be in Washington, D.C., that they were closing up shop or going on hiatus, is how it was described in the earliest days, we knew, being based in D.C., that this city would warmly welcome a festival and that there would be a void that we wanted to fill. So we put our minds together. We knew that we had this important history with a documentary festival in this region and decided that it was necessary to fill that void. And that's what DC Docs became.
That's amazing. And like I said, it's really stood up on the national landscape of being a tremendous festival. And I'm excited to talk with you more about it. But I'm curious, Sky, how you got involved in filmmaking. Was it something early on you knew that you were going to do, or something that just evolved as your career went on?
That's such a great question. I really think that my origin story in film goes back to the very, very beginning. I grew up in New York City, and my father
Right.
was very involved in the avant garde film world. And he himself actually founded, with some significant partners, including Jonas Mekas, an avant garde film theater that still lives today called Anthology Film Archives. Truly, as a child growing up in New York City, for me, it was much more normal to see an experimental film by Stan Brakhage
Right.
than it was to go to a Walt Disney film. And in my life, we didn't have air conditioning, so it was not unusual to go to three films on a Sunday in the middle of summer just to get out of the heat. I grew up deeply immersed in film culture and in a community that really loved art cinema and valued the independent force in cinema. And so for me, the question all my life was not so much would it be film, but what my specific passion within film would be. And that took a little time. I studied film in school, both practical and historical and theoretical. I wound up getting a master's degree and ultimately almost a PhD. I'm forever ABD in cinema studies at NYU. I played a hand at filmmaking, all those things. And I think that over time, a few things started becoming clear. One was that my real interest was documentary. While I loved going to the movies and seeing all kinds of films, there was something
Right.
interesting to me about creating some parameters professionally in film that I could really understand a particular genre. And then I loved curation. The idea that this thing I loved most in the world, seeing films, could actually be a career. That, my goodness, there was actually a job that was about seeing films, thinking about films. And curation, almost by just happenstance, the expression of my curation became film festivals. I think when I was younger, I thought my dream was to work in a place like the Museum of Modern Art or Lincoln
Right.
Center Film Society. But my first job was in film festivals. And I have literally been running film festivals for 25 consecutive years. There is not a single year in my life since the day I started where I have not been involved in film festivals. And the reality of that is that it's certainly curation, but it's
Right.
also event planning. There's a lot of it's this high and low. There's the sexy part of it, which is like
Right.
watching films and going to film festivals and putting
Right.
films together and bringing filmmakers together. And then there's the signing contracts and thinking about
Yeah.
scanners for line wrangling and all the incredible minutia that one hopes is actually invisible to the public.
Right.
If it's working well, no one sees those things because again, once they become visible, they're visible because it's a problem. And I can explain that more in terms of what I mean down the line. But I think film has just always been a part of my life in a very important and meaningful way for me.
That's an amazing story. So do
Mm,
you feel like to run a festival at the level DC Docs is, that you almost need those 25 years of experience to be able to make it work well? Because like, you never hear about filmmakers being like, "Oh, yeah, I made my investments on running film festivals, now I can make films." Like, it's not something you get into to become rich, but I feel like
Absolutely.
you have to have that skill set to even be successful because you have so much competition, not only other festivals, but for especially in a market like DC, a
Right.
million other things happening. So
Yeah.
you feel like your DC Docs, the success of it comes from just all that experience that you have in running festivals?
Without a doubt. I think it's not so much that I think it's the accelerated success and like it is quite remarkable. And I don't take it lightly and I don't take it for granted that within 3 years, DC Docs almost has become an institution and
Right.
that we are entrusted with the most important nonfiction content that there is out there in any given year. And that is, I do think, a fairly extraordinary thing to have accomplished in such a short time. And I do not believe that would have been possible without the years of experience. And the years of experience are not just about the know how to do it, but the trust. Both me and my partner, Jamie, are able to bring decades of well earned relationships where I think people know and trust us that we know what we're doing and that we have aligned values about what it means to showcase these films. So someone else certainly, and many people do, could have come up with the idea to run a film festival and do some really fun and exciting things. And in some ways, that could have been an interesting new energy. I think
Right.
maybe someone without the level of experience I have might be a little bit more liberated to think really outside of the box and think transformatively about what the future of a festival could be. But I do think that Jamie and my ability to get this festival up and running and to have it reach the stature that it's reached in such a short time could never have been done without the years of history and relationships beneath it.
That's amazing. So one of the things that most interests me about the festival is this idea of celebrity
Commentaries,
documentaries and this idea of having them as a way to draw in crowds. So we talked about it's hard to make money on festivals. I get why they want to have celebrity documentaries come in because it's hard to get people in. And you can't just run a festival trying to get emerging filmmakers. However, the emerging
Mhm.
filmmakers are truly the ones who are so passionate about the art. So how do you balance, and I feel like
Yeah.
people can look at your schedule, it's available on DC Docs, I'll link it. I feel like you put a lineup that is a documentary filmmakers documentary film festival. Like it has all the
Mhm.
films that you would want to see if you love documentary, and it's not a lot of puff pieces. It doesn't look like it's
Right.
something that is just trying to get people in the door based on some celebrity filmmaker's name. But of
Right.
course, you have to keep your budget. So how do you balance those 2 challenges of making it a genuine film festival that's for real documentaries and not just puff piece that'll get people in?
I think that the kind of liberating thing about running an independent documentary festival is that we aren't actually stuck with the same pressures that, let's say, a streaming platform might be, or even a film in a in the theatrical space. Meaning, we have a lineup of 100 films, and there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to shape a program that can be very dynamic and diverse. And I use the word diversity to mean a lot of different things. Diversity in terms of whether this is an emerging filmmaker or a veteran filmmaker, diversity in terms of the kinds of topics that are expressed, diversity in terms of the artistic approach. I totally understand your question. How, when one is building a documentary festival, are you thinking about balancing the market pressures and the market opportunities
Exactly.
versus the kind of artistic pressures? I don't see them as in polar opposition. I see it a little bit as actually the truth of what the documentary field is right now. And our festival is really a mirror on what is happening in the field. There are many celebrity documentaries that are phenomenal, that are incredible portraits of remarkable people doing remarkable things. And just because it's featuring a well-known person shouldn't necessarily mean that it's a flop
Right.
piece
Yeah.
or something that doesn't deserve time. In fact, I wouldn't quite describe it this way, but our opening night film, Steal This Story Please, the world premiere by Carl Deal and Tia Lesson, features Amy Goodman, beloved journalist of Democracy Now! By no means, I think she would be surprised to be if someone described that as a celebrity piece, but it is a
True.
film
Yeah.
that's centering an individual and you get to experience a huge world and so many chapters through that. We want our festival to appeal to a wide range of people but recognizing that we don't have to have every single film at every given time appeal to everybody.
Right.
And there's a big difference there. If we wanted the entire program to appeal to all people, we'd have a very benign, very beige program.
Yep.
But I think what you do is you take a step back, you take a 30,000-foot view, and you look at the program as a whole, and you say to yourself, do we have those little precious films that are maybe experimental and pushing the bounds of aesthetics that maybe play in a small theater, that the 75 people who pack that theater will feel it's a transformative experience versus the film that's going to draw a crowd on Friday night at 8 o'clock in our largest venue? Or like you really just think about balance in a broader view. And I'm not quite sure that I'm fully answering your question, but I feel like I'm more at ease and more at peace with not trying to create a kind of perfect program,
Right.
but really thinking of the program as reflective of a very nuanced, dynamic, complicated, contradictory field that has so many things happening. And we are bringing that to people. And they then have the decision of how they want to engage with the offerings that are there. And I'll just flag, because I think it's maybe a nice opportunity to do so, that we also have this, and you may be asking this question, but we also have a concurrent forum, which is really more a space for people in the field to come together to address the questions and concerns that practitioners and the ecosystem that supports those practitioners are facing. And that becomes a place, I think, also where questions around what a lot of filmmakers are feeling is a crisis of distribution, that a lot
Yep.
of the more traditional models are fading and funding is fading. And God, there's so many, we are in a period of sustained transformation where a lot of the old models have been thrown up into the air and they're still falling and they haven't landed yet. And it's like, where are we? So I think the forum becomes a place where we ask questions around what do filmmakers do when they're facing a marketplace that really wants to celebrate things like celebrity documentaries or the true
Right.
crime genre, who want to tell a story that might be considered provocative in today's day, tackling topics that increasingly feel under threat. Because many documentaries of documentary filmmakers are compelled to tell stories that they feel speak truth to power. And doing that today feels more fraught than ever. So our forum becomes a space, I think, to grapple with some of those questions.
I love that answer, Sky. And I'm curious how you feel about the role of a documentary filmmaker now in terms of their income. So I remember I attended like a Film Independent webinar on how to become a documentary filmmaker. And there was a panelist who said we need to destigmatize working at the coffee shop. And I thought,
Mhm.
wow, that's really interesting. I haven't had anybody on the show who's been like independently wealthy from documentary filmmaking. They're always, even you think about the top award winners at some of the top festivals, they're still having other jobs.
Yeah.
So, what is your view on how a documentary filmmaker makes it in the world today? Or they just have to feel like, hey, the reality of it is you have to find different streams of income. You're not just gonna be able to keep a roof over your head making documentary films. What are your thoughts on being a documentary filmmaker
Yeah.
nowadays?
Oh, it's very hard. Actually, this is a topic that indeed has, I think I think people are becoming increasingly more transparent and need to be in discussing this because there is I think there's a lot of confusion about how some people are making it and how
Right,
others aren't. There's not a lot of transparency around what people earn in documentaries, and I think there's a kind of concerted effort to make that more transparent so people can begin to see what is what some people are able to do to create
right,
sustained careers. I think in general, historically, if we want to say that documentary filmmakers are artists, some might argue that they're journalists, some might argue that they're someplace in between these two things. This is an endless, infinite struggle that all artists have had throughout history. And I think fundamentally we don't value the arts in our culture. And the fact that it's not seen as something that is worthy of sustained support is really unfortunate, but it is a reality. And the truth is that many artists do have to do things. Academic institutions have become a very important home for many artists to have some stability and have opportunities to do their work and then teach. I don't really have an answer to this question other than a kind of validation that it's an for many a kind of unsustainable career. And I think that there becomes questions sometimes around who are those people that are in a position that they can make it sustainable, and perhaps there's some hidden resources that don't really get made visible that some filmmakers who are able to build a career have available to them. So I don't really have an answer to the question other than a recognition of the problem
right.
that it's not valued.
And I love how you
Do
put it transparency because I haven't heard it,
Mhm.
but I feel like that we're getting somewhere near there. A couple episodes ago, I talked with Daniel Ambroso, documentary filmmaker, and
Yeah,
he said that
I know.
either people are coming from family money or they're lying. And I thought, oh wow, okay.
Right.
And like I feel like it is a little bit more possible for filmmakers to say, "Hey, I've got other things going on," and that's just the honesty of it. Where maybe a couple
Yeah,
years ago, you painted this picture of I'm just making documentaries all day and just that's how I make my money, and it's really not
yeah,
true. And transparency might be where we're heading, where
right.
people are
Yeah,
feeling more comfortable to talk about it.
absolutely. I will say when I love Daniel's blunt response, and I think he put it I think I was hedging around the edges of that. But it also in saying that, suddenly I had a revelation a little bit, which is in some ways this idea that there's a single career is a little old school. And
Right,
actually, when I think about myself and I think about a lot of people around me, many of us in this day and age have very hybrid careers, if not by necessity, by choice.
right.
Even for myself, teach at Georgetown. I'm there full time. For many years, I've been running their film and media studies program, and obviously, in the past few years, I've been building this festival. I do this for a number of reasons. One is because those two things combined truly allow me to express the absolute depths of and broad range of my passions. I love being in front of students. I love giving, truly giving to the next generation. I get so inspired. This sounds really cheesy, but I think it's been incredibly useful for me to constantly be with young people and forced to help understand the field and to study the field to be able to communicate it. At the same time, I think if that's all I did, I might feel a tremendous loss of being able to work with peers, be able to work with artists who are already established and to be able to have a really important supporting role in that work. Because I do see festivals as a supporting role for artists. And I am perfectly delighted and happy to be in that position. I want that. Um, but so I do that partly out of passion, but I also do it out of necessity. That is
Right.
how I make my life work financially. It is how the pieces of my financial life, my every bit of my life, my healthcare life come together. And
Right.
I truly, when I look around, I think most people today, and certainly new generations, are not necessarily all falling into this one monolithic job that does everything for them for years on
Your
end.
life.
Yeah. And so I think there's a little bit I think filmmakers, it's not always because they have to, that is, have multiple jobs to sustain a career in filmmakers. It's not always that. in many ways, I think we're all existing with our limbs in different pots. And it can actually be a little bit stimulating to get to move between a few different spaces at times.
That's an amazing answer, Sky. So AI, huge issue in narrative and
Yeah.
also documentary. Do you have any plans to have sort of an AI part of the festival? Do you know of any of the documentaries on the list that have AI in it? Was that a
Yeah.
question? What are your thoughts about AI?
Yeah. It's so interesting. We are addressing AI, but actually not so much. We're addressing it with a lot of kind of attention to it. So the two key things that come to mind from this year's festival, actually three, there are two panels. One is literally called Documentary in the Age of AI, and it is explicitly actively addressing the question of both the opportunities that it's presenting, as well as the obvious challenges and kind of potential threats. I think if one were to approach the question of AI also monolithically, without nuance, you miss
Yep.
something. If everyone's talking about the threats to AI, you miss the certain extraordinary efficiencies that it offers. And vice versa, if anyone's just sitting here celebrating without celebrating blindly all the things AI can do, I think one is ignoring the threats that it can have down the line. So that panel's kind of addressing that across a few different lenses. We're also addressing it in the context of this wonderful archival panel called Memory in the Making, where archivists looking at AI is both accelerating and creating incredible efficiencies in terms of the work of an archival producer, but also how generative AI is able to almost to replicate and almost render invisible the difference between something that's artificial and something that's real, and what that means for audiences who can no longer discern the difference and who may not be flagged to the difference, and what that fundamentally means for our understanding of history, of truth, of what is real, what is not. And that's really important. There's also a film in our festival called Deep Faking Sam Altman by Adam Balalau. And forgive me if I'm not pronouncing his name correctly at this moment, but that's a really playful, both profound and funny exploration of AI's place in, yeah, for a creator, premised around his desire to get an interview with Sam Altman and how that leads him on this impossible chase that doesn't ever quite come to fruition, but where he's exploring the possibility of AI as a creative partner in filmmaking. It's a really interesting film. In terms of, I think, again, I'm going to use the word transparency. I think what a lot of people in the documentary film community are saying at this point is it's not necessarily unacceptable to use AI. What's unacceptable is to not flag the use of it for an audience in certain key ways. For example, when there is a narration, we all may remember the story not too long ago where there was some upset over the Anthony
Yep.
Bourdain film Roadrunner that
Yep.
fabricated very small pieces of his voice. They didn't, they pulled aspects of things that he'd written in letters and used this AI generated voice. The concern was not solely that happened end stop. It was that it wasn't disclosed.
Right.
What I'm seeing now is a lot of disclosure. So I come across many films that have a title card at the beginning saying this voice that you're hearing is generated by AI, but it's pulled entirely from letters and prior recordings and other things. And I think that's critically important. And also, certainly, when it comes to using AI to generate images that are presented as real, this is important to also disclose. But a lot of people in the industry are also suggesting that in different ways, AI is already been used, but we called it by a different name: color correction, sound
Right.
correction, editing. When you're editing a scene, you're breaking the reality. We don't go to documentaries to watch a surveillance footage. We're not, and so all documentaries are edited. A camera's moving. We are distorting and interfering with quote unquote reality already. And so I think that some wanted to point out that if we're only criticizing or getting concerned about AI, we're ignoring all the ways in which film manipulates reality. And we present these films as real, as this is the real world. When I teach documentary, I often talk to students about really understanding what we're seeing is a perspective on the world. It is not a mirror to the world. It is not the world reflected back without intervention. It is a perspective on the world presented by, first and foremost, a filmmaker behind the camera, but also a team of people who are using that as the source material for a particular kind of expression. It is not reality with a capital R. So it's very nuanced, and I think that these conversations deserve nuance instead of this binary of it's right or wrong, it's black or white.
That's such a brilliant answer. Sky, if I talk to you again in 5 years, what do you think DC Docs looks like? What's next for you over the next half decade or so?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting. Building something is very exciting, and I think there's a novelty around the newness and maybe even a kind of a surprise around, like, something that's coming up out of nowhere. I think that there's a risk and an opportunity in 5 years from now, which would bring us to our 8th year, we're almost a decade old, where you almost become an institution.
Right.
My hope is that in 5 years, we are able to maintain some of the magic, and I truly feel like the festival has a little bit of magic right now. I think that's the magic of the surprise, the magic of the intimacy. Even though we're growing, there's still a sense. I think the festival captures this interesting tension between a feeling of intimacy and smallness and also grandiosity, because the films and the people there are incredible leaders in the field, but it's all in this kind of intimate space. So I hope that we can hold on to the magic as we continue to sustain ourselves and to become a stable, no longer new entity, and that we figure out how to both hold on to our core, the values that inspired us to do this in the first place, while responding to all the things that are going to be coming our way. There's so many things that we couldn't have, when we decided to start DC Docs. I think where we are today was unanticipated in terms of, and where we're going to be in 5 years will is unanticipated. And I just hope we can hold on to those. That again, I'll just use it, the magic of it.
I love that
Mm.
answer, Sky. As I've learned doing this podcast, the best part of indie film is supporting other people's projects, of telling people about films that they may not, and filmmakers that they may not have heard of. So, of course, with the caveat, look on DC Docs lineup. There's so many different films that people should come and see. But aside from that caveat, is there a film or filmmaker that throughout your career you've thought, wow, I wish more people knew about that person?
Gosh, that's such a great question. That's such a great question. I think for me, because of my early and sustained experience with avant-garde cinema, which are filmmakers that the tiniest pool of people
Right.
are familiar with, I am used to that. That's kind of, that's almost what my whole compass has been. I've often been centered in a space where we're aware of the outliers, the people that few people know. I think I don't wanna really call out any particular filmmaker, because I feel like as someone who's putting on a festival, I really feel
I
like
know.
my role is to really be embracing.
But what about
But
me,
there are,
Sky? Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
exactly. I really, exactly, I don't wanna do that. But I do wanna say that I think one thing I'm really excited about is the place for discovery that can happen at our festival. We really do care a lot about becoming a platform and a pipeline for filmmakers that are at an earlier stage of their career, to get the amplification and the support to bring them out into the world. And I have absolutely seen in my career, and I'm going to answer your question actually a different way, which is to say that here I am 25 years or so into the world of film festivals. And there are actually a number of filmmakers that come that I've worked with every year, but who are even here this year, where they too were budding brand new filmmakers with their very first films in the festivals I worked in 25 years ago. So, for example, Rachel Grady and Heidi Ewing of the film Folk Tales, a beautiful film that deserves to be seen on the big screen, are coming back to DC Docs this year. I my very first job with some significance in the festival world was the director of programming at the Newport International Film Festival. And I brought these two wonderful young filmmakers who had their very first film called Boys of Baraka to that festival. And what's really exciting is here we all are 25 years later. Here I am with DC Docs. Here they are with maybe their 10th feature film, including the most incredible career, including Academy nominated films. And I love the journey we've all been on together, still doing this work. And so I look forward to the new filmmakers that we're going to be meeting for the very first time this year, and meeting them again, God willing, 25 years from now, as they're also the kind of, not so much seniors, but I don't know what the word is exactly that I'm looking for, having a certain degree of experience behind them for the new generation.
That's amazing. Sky Sitney, co-founder and festival director of DC Docs, June 12th through 15th. Let me give a shout out to your IT team. It's so easy to go on the
Oh,
website and buy passes and tickets. I've been on film festivals. You're like, I have to do logins. You have to do 82 steps. You're like, wait a second. How do I just buy a ticket? I think it's 2 clicks to
I
get
am so
either a ticket
thrilled
or
to hear
pass.
that.
It's so easy, Sky.
That makes me so happy, and I'm gonna share that with them. They will appreciate it. I have the team at DC Docs is extraordinary. That's also really important, even though I get to sit here with you, and I have mentioned Jamie many times. There
Right.
are obviously a festival of this magnitude and scale there's so many extraordinary people, including our web team, our creative designer, who are instrumental in putting this together. So I'm gonna share that compliment, and I appreciate that.
1,000%, and you get
Mm,
to read, like, the biography of the filmmaker, there's, like, contact information. It's very well done. DC Docs is just already a national staple, and I think it's only going to continue to grow. Sky, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you.